Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, and I am worn through the storm and through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be recognizing a few people here as we begin, but there will be no thanks to whoever required me to follow that. Thank you, Minister Grace. That was amazing. That was an incredible way to start. All right. Let me welcome you all and thank you all for being here at this soil collection ceremony. I look around this crowd, I look around the square, and I see a lot of folks who have been at so many of the events that we have had over the last several years, the annual observances, the commemorations of the murder of Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas. And I see so many of you who have been here faithfully at each of those events, who have been at the beginning in 19 when we kicked this off and started this effort, and have continued to come back. And so many of you who have served on the committees and really been the people power for this effort. And I want to begin by thanking all of you for just being here and being a part of this. There's a lot of special people here, but you guys are the most special. And so thank you, and let's give you all a big hand for being here. There are a number of elected officials who are here, and I want to recognize them all, as well as staff members and other leaders who have been a part of this effort from the beginning. So first of all, my colleagues from the City Council, we have our Vice Mayor, Amy Jackson, right up here at the front. We have Councilman Kanik Aguirre on the end. Councilmember Sarah Bagley. Councilwoman Aaliyah Gaskins. Councilman Kirk McPike. From the General Assembly, we're privileged to have State Senator Adam Ebbin. We have Delegate Elizabeth Bennett Parker. We have our Sheriff, Sean Casey. We have former Mayor Allison Silberberg. And I'm not sure if I missed anyone, but I'm sure they'll tell me here in a second when I did. So, in addition, we also have our Police Chief, Don Hayes, right up here. Out of uniform, but still our Fire Chief, Corey Smedley, right over here. Didn't look familiar at all, but apparently he's our Fire Chief still. We have our City Manager, Jim Parajan. We have a number of department leaders who have been involved in this effort. We have Gene Kelleher from the Office of Human Rights. There she is. Our brand new Communications Director, Ebony Fleming, right up in front. Do we have Jacqueline Tucker from the I don't know. I have not seen Jacqueline, so she's going to be here. Patricia Washington from Visit Alexandria. I did see her in the back. There she is. Phil Pugh, representing the Transportation Environmental Services. And you're going to hear later from these two women, but they have been indispensable in this effort. First of all, the Director of the Office of Historic Alexandria, Gretchen Bulova. And the head of our Black History Museum, Audrey Davis. I want to especially recognize the students from Alexandria City High School who are here and helping out in a couple different roles. I want to thank all of them for their leadership and being a part of this effort. Thank you very much. And we're going to have a few students who are going to be joining us down in Montgomery in a few weeks, and so we're excited to bring them along with us, the next generation leading as part of this effort. I want to acknowledge the students from Jefferson-Houston, as well as their teacher, Nicole Redinger, who built these vessels here in the front, which are holding the soil. They look amazing. They did a good job, and they started planning this the first week of school and worked to design these, and they've really done an incredible job in making this happen. I also want to recognize you're going to hear later from, or you're going to learn a little more about the descendants we have from Joseph McCoy who are here, and we want to thank all of you for being a part of it, and we'll introduce you a little bit later, but thank you so much for being here as part of this event. It makes it all the more powerful. You know, each time we have done this, I have tried, when we've had our annual observance for Benjamin Thomas and Joseph McCoy, I've tried to draw out a little piece of the history that maybe we haven't talked about, and try to draw connections between those pieces of the history and why we are here, as well as the issues that we deal with today. You know, whether it is a long ago predecessor of the position I hold today, and a predecessor of the position Sheriff Casey holds today, who, you know, were kind of stood aside and allowed a Benjamin Thomas to be murdered so many years ago. And my predecessor, who, in a half-hearted attempt to quell the mob, told them that, don't worry, just wait another day, and if justice is not done in his mind, he would lead a lynch mob the next day. Or whether it is the governor of the Commonwealth, sorry, it's an Alexandria issue we have to deal with from time to time, or whether it is the governor of the Commonwealth who was so revolted by the murder of Joseph McCoy, not necessarily because he was frustrated that he was murdered by a mob, but that he was so confident that the justice system would have quickly convicted him and executed him, and that the mob was really an uncivilized way of achieving the same end. And you know, we stand back revolted certainly by what occurred 123 and 125 years ago. But we also understand that there was a rot in the institutions that existed in our city, in our Commonwealth, and in our country at that time. And while we have fortunately no longer see the same extrajudicial race terror that we saw back then, we recognize that those leaders and the leaders that followed them turned some of that same passion into systems, into laws, into processes that in many ways achieve the same result, and in some cases still achieve the same results. And so, you know, later you're going to hear from Gretchen and Audrey about the history of our effort and the work that we've done in the Community Remembrance Project. But I think it's also important to recognize how this project came into being. You know, the Equal Justice Initiative was founded by Brian Stevenson in 1989. And those of you know who've watched Just Mercy, you've probably seen the depiction of it and know some of that history. The nonprofit was founded originally to provide defense for those who did not receive proper counsel in the criminal justice system. And some might say that, why was this Community Remembrance Project, why was this housed in the Equal Justice Initiative? How did this come from that effort? But for those who understand the history, they know it's very natural. It was an extension of that. They know that you cannot solve some of the modern day injustices without recognizing that they, at their root, have 400 years of racial subjugation that has occurred in this country. And the Equal Justice Initiative recognized that without that reconciliation, we cannot achieve that justice that we are seeking. Whether it is apartheid in South Africa, genocide in Europe or in Africa and other places in the world, we have seen these truth and reconciliation efforts that have followed these kind of incidents. And unfortunately, in the United States of America, we have never really had that reconciliation, at least in any comprehensive way, in this country. And so the Community Remembrance Project is part of that effort, part of our effort to be a part of that, and recognizing that that we must have that reconciliation in order to achieve that justice. And so while we look back 125 years or 123 years ago and we're very revolted by what we saw, we also recognize that 125 years from now, people will gather in this square and they're going to be revolted by things that we did and we're doing today. And I think our job is not just to show up, which is great that you have all showed up and continue to show up. That's important. We want you to be here. We want you to come down to Alabama with us in a couple of weeks. We want you to be a part of this process. But what's more important is taking the lessons that we draw from this history 125, 123 years ago, as well is to look at what we are doing today and look at what we will be revolted by 125 years from now and solve that and seek justice in that. And that's why we're here, and that's why this project is so important. I do have a proclamation. Thank you. I do have a proclamation that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to sit down. Because I can already feel the stairs behind me. So, whereas on April 23rd, 1897, and August 8th, 1899, Alexandria wielded the devastating sword of racial violence, lynching 2 black youth who were natives of this city and terrorizing the African-American members of this community. And whereas on this day in the year 2022, Alexandria acknowledges these gross miscarriages of justice and accepts responsibility by telling the truth of those histories. And whereas the events began on April 22nd, 1897, when Richard Lacey, a white man, accused Joseph McCoy, an African-American teenager who had worked for him for many years, of sexually assaulting Lacey's child. McCoy was taken to the police station where he denied the charge, and McCoy was locked in a holding cell and then interrogated by Lieutenant James Smith, who reported McCoy confessed to the crime despite the earlier denial. And whereas at 1 a.m. on April 23rd, a lynch mob pulled McCoy from his cell, dragged him to the southeast corner of Cameron and Lee Streets, and strung him to a lamppost. He was struck with cobblestones, beaten, and shot, and he died without anyone being held responsible. And whereas just 2 years later, on August 7th, 1899, a 16-year-old black youth named Benjamin Thomas was accused by a 7-year-old white girl who lived next door of assaulting her. Her father, Edward Clock, swore out a warrant and police arrested Thomas. And whereas despite his plea of innocence, he was charged with a crime but never tried. Thomas was taken from the city jail on August 8th, a rope pulled tight around his chest, and he was dragged for half a mile down South St. Asaph Street and then King Street. The white mob pelted him with stones, bricks, and pieces of iron. Wounded and bleeding, Thomas cried out for his mother. The mob stopped at the southwest corner of King and Fairfax Streets and hanged Thomas on a lamppost. An inquiry revealed he died by, quote, hands unknown, end quote. And whereas no white Alexandrian was held accountable for the murders, and whereas Alexandria deeply regrets the actions and inactions of our white forebears, and on September 24th in the year 2022 acknowledges the terror experienced by McCoy, Thomas, and the African-American members of this community. And we recognize these 2 men whose legal rights were thwarted, to whom justice was denied, and who lost their lives to racial hatred. And we apologize to Joseph McCoy, Benjamin Thomas, to their families, and to the black community posthumously. And whereas this Alexandria soil represents the lives of McCoy and Thomas, as well as the heritage and accomplishments of the African-American members of this community. And whereas as such, this soil is sacred to us. And whereas Alexandria citizens will carry this hallowed soil to a final resting place at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, to bring peace to the souls of McCoy and Thomas and to the community of Alexandria. And upon our return from this pilgrimage, this city will continue to lay bare past and present inequities, to expose our troubled racial history, and to bear witness to these atrocities. Alexandria is committed to reconciliation, so our community emerges stronger and more inclusive. In this way, the deaths of Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas will never be forgotten. Now, therefore, I, Justin M. Wilson, Mayor of the City of Alexandria, Virginia, and on behalf of the Alexandria City Council, do hereby recognize this soil collection ceremony as the memorialization of the lives and legacy of Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas in the City of Alexandria. And I call this observance and the pilgrimage to Alabama to the attention of our citizens, so that all will know the City of Alexandria will continue to place first and foremost the rights of all humanity, so that our city may be an example of all. So I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Alexandria to be affixed this 24th day of September 2022. Thank you all very much for being here today. I'm now going to invite to the podium Gretchen Bulova and Audrey Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your extraordinary leadership over the last couple of years. And also thank you to our council and our state officials and our public safety officers. We cannot do this without the support of our elected officials, our city staff, and our community. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to begin just by recognizing the members of our steering committee. And if you all want to stand as I read your name, Reverend Quadricos Driscoll, Rabbi David Spinrad, Jean Kelleher, Darylyn Franklin, Letty Maxwell, Michael Johnson, Mac Myers, Linda Howard, and Mark Farkas. Thank you all for what you've done to support this community. And this event required many hands, and all of the names of those who helped plan this event are listed in the program, so please take a look at the acknowledgements page. So thank you. Let's all just thank them for all the work they put into this. Thanks. So our community began this journey together in 2019 at the Charles-Houston Recreation Center. Many of you were there. Many of you were there that day, as well as our local elected officials. Congressman Don Beyer joined us, and Kira Boone from EJI was there as well. That day, we as a community formed the Alexandria Community Remembrance Project, and we committed to working with EJI's Remembrance Program to research and tell the truth about our history, to reckon with what we find, and then to build a more inclusive, more egalitarian, and a more just community. As we discovered and shared the details of the lynchings of young Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas, we were shocked, we were outraged, and we grieved. Lynchings of Black citizens in this city seemed incongruous with our nostalgic image of historic Alexandria. But then, so do the horrors done to African Americans suffered in the custody of Isaac Franklin and John Armfield at 1315 Duke Street. In our community, these difficult stories are now being acknowledged. Names are being spoken, and our concept of the past is changing. Alexandria is committed to truth-telling and sharing the full history of our community. We have and we will continue to tell the truth about what happened to Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas, and other stories that we will unearth. As historians and as concerned community members, ACRP understands that only by knowing and sharing the truth can we ever experience reconciliation. This afternoon's event marks a milestone in this mission in our work with EJI. Each Remembrance Project is asked to honor the lives of lynching victims from their community with a soil collection ceremony. Over the summer, a team of ACRP members, joined by archaeologists from our staff, reviewed sites recommended by the Soil and Marker Committee that were associated with the lives of Mr. McCoy and Mr. Thomas. They also looked at areas of African American significance throughout the community. So in August, soil was excavated from as many of these sites as possible. And soil representing the life and death of Joseph McCoy and the civil rights accomplishments of African American community has been combined and placed in the vessel made by the students at Jefferson-Houston in this vessel. And the same was done for the soil for Benjamin Thomas in this vessel. In a short time, you will be invited to participate in placing this sacred earth into the jars that we will then take to EJI. It is our intention to hand deliver these jars in October to the representatives at the Equal Justice Initiative at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, and that's in less than a fortnight. It's a very exciting day, and again, a huge milestone for the Alexandria Community Remembrance Project. And thank you for being here to participate and be part of this ceremony. I'd like to now introduce my colleague, ACRP co-director and director of the Black History Museum, Audrey Davis.
Thank you, Gretchen, and it's so great to see so many of you here with us today. And as Gretchen says, we are so excited about delivering the soil in person to EJI, and we have over 160 residents joining us on our pilgrimage to EJI. So I think that deserves a round of applause. Lewis McAdams, Frank Reeves, Joe Harris, unknown. Robert White, Charles Bentley, John Pennington, Will Scott, Cleveland Harding, Joe Lawrence, Eb Calhoun, Viola Dial, and Lily Cobb. These are just some of the names from a wall of soil jars in the Visitor Center at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. Most jars represent one lynching victim. Some jars represent multiple lynching victims, victims who were terrorized, tortured, and ultimately hanged. When I stood at the wall of jars in February, there were 270 in front of me, with empty shelves from floor to ceiling, waiting for new jars to be installed. Later, I stood at another wall of hundreds of soil jars a few blocks away at the Legacy Museum. The soil in the EJI jars is in different colors. Some soil is dark red, as if stained by the blood of the men, women, and children who endured the horror of being lynched. Some jars contain pebbles and stones, reminiscent of the hard, dusty dirt roads that many were dragged across to their deaths. While some jars had soil so fine and so pale in color, it reminded you of an old photograph, faded but with just enough pigment to remind you it once captured a moment of someone's life. Who knew jars of soil would tell a horrible story, but one we all needed to hear? Soil. Sorry, I just want to make sure he's okay. Soil. When we are children, we play in the dirt, using our imaginations to mold it to desired shapes. As adults, we lovingly tend soil to bring forth glorious flowers, fruits, and vegetables. Then for many of us, there comes a time when you are seated in front of a casket or urn as you hear the words, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and your heart breaks. In 1897 and 1899, 2 Alexandria families had their hearts broken, and the trajectory of their lives forever changed, just feet from where we sit today. Jars. The EJI jars have become urns, with soil representing souls no longer with us, souls whose burial sites are often unknown and unmarked. Our Alexandria soil represents places from the lives of Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas. The soil also represents centuries of Alexandria Black history and the world McCoy and Thomas never knew or would have dreamed possible, a world where African Americans can go to a library, where they can visit a Black History Museum, or visit a city park honoring Black men and women who have achieved great things and built this city. Today, as we touch this soil, as our community fills the jars, we send our love and peace to the souls of Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas. We send our love to the McCoy family members recently met, and to the Thomas family members we hope to be with soon. On our pilgrimage, we share Alexandria's troubled past, along with our commitment to interpret Black history, where truth overcomes bigotry and where honesty replaces denial. As we touch this sacred soil, we make a personal pledge to dedicate ourselves to equity, justice, and peace. Thank you.
On Thursday evening, April 23rd, 1897, around 8 o'clock, a police officer came by looking for me, or my employer, Mr. Richard Lacey. I told the officer that I had seen Mr. Lacey go into town a while back. He said he was Lieutenant James Smith. Then, he said, "I'm going to take you down to the station house with me." He grabbed my arm and led me to the street. It clearly wasn't a request. When we got to the police station on the east side of City Hall, Lieutenant Smith told me that I was under arrest for hurting Annie Lacey, my employer's 8-year-old daughter. I told him it wasn't true. He walked me down a corridor and put me in a cell. I sat there until Lieutenant Smith came back, handcuffed me, and led me upstairs to the police chief's office. The chief wasn't there, but John Strider, a city councilman and reporter for the Washington Times, was sitting at the chief's desk. He had a pad and a pencil. The lieutenant said Strider was there as a witness. "I want you to tell me the truth, and don't tell me any lies," he said. Then he asked, "Did you tamper with that little girl in any criminal way?" I flatly denied the allegation. The next morning, newspapers said that I finally broke down and acknowledged my guilt. And Strider wrote that the details of my confession were too revolting for publication. They charged me with a felony. Around 9 o'clock, the Commonwealth attorney, Leonard Marbury, came to the station to officially take my confession. I denied everything according to the Evening Star reporter, who then wrote that after a little persuasion, I confessed. But he said, "I didn't seem to understand the seriousness of the crime." Later, shortly after 11 o'clock, there were a lot of voices outside the station. A crowd was gathering on Fairfax Street. The police went out and urged about 150 men to let the law take its course. Lieutenant Smith told them that if I was found guilty at court, they would hang me. They came back inside and locked the door. A few minutes later, a man outside yelled something about protecting their white woman. A sharp crack sounded. The double door swung open and several men burst into the station house. "Fire," ordered Lieutenant Smith, and their officers fired the revolvers into the air. As they yanked the wooden beam into the station house, some of the rioters were pulled across the threshold. They were arrested and put into a holding cell. Lieutenant Smith picked up a double-barreled shotgun and pulled the trigger. Boom. Those who weren't under arrest backed away. The officers slammed the door shut. They braced the doors with the same timber the mob used to break in. A bit of quiet returned. The police were obviously ruffled, windows were broken, and glass was littering the sidewalk. Lieutenant Smith went inside and closed the shutters. The mob had knocked out the street lamp, and when the chief of police arrived at the station, it was shrouded in darkness. He went upstairs to his office. The others cleaned up and reloaded their guns. By about 1 o'clock on Friday, April 23rd, about 500 people were in front of the station. They demanded the police turn me over, but the officer said no. Seconds later, the doors gave way to a 16-foot piece of timber. Officer Wilkinson showed me a hiding place above the cell door and helped me wedge into it. Wild, unhinged men poured through the open doors and the windows of the station house. The papers reported that some of the lynchers pinned officers down so they couldn't protect me. Some swung axes at the doors leading to the cell. Moses Comfort was yelling, "I'm not McCoy." I held my breath. It was difficult to stay in the tight crevice. Then their feet retreated. Footfalls on the ceiling above me. They were on the second floor. That is when I fell. I found a hiding place in the corner behind the bench. I was crouching there when a white man found me. A shout went out and a million white hands clutched my shoulders, tore at my shirt, pulled my hair. I was dragged through the corridor, past the chewed up double doors, and thrown into the middle of Fairfax Street. On my knees, I begged them for my life. Sweat, blood, tears ran together. I could not see in front of me. They beat me with clubs. They forced me to the corner of Fairfax and then down Cameron Street. I stumbled and fell across the way. The stolen rope became a noose. It looped around my neck. The lamppost at the corner would be my gallows. At the corner of my eye, I saw a cobblestone. Then the searing pain engulfed my eye and my head. Bullets pierced into my shoulder and tore into my thigh. The rope grew. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Naeem Scott. On Monday night, August 7th, 1899, at 8 o'clock, there was a loud knock on our front door. We had finished dinner. Mom was cleaning, and I started towards the door. I saw two police officers. One was trying to peer inside. Officer Knight said they were looking for me. And my mom's hand tightened around my arm as if her holding me would anchor me in place. Officer Wilkinson asked if I was Benjamin Thomas and told me I was under arrest. But I hadn't done anything. I was here at home with my mom. Why were they arresting me? He said I assaulted the little white girl who lived next door to us. What? I didn't do anything to her. I told them that. I've been here all day. I told them I am innocent. They handcuffed me. Two officers took me out my door, down my steps, away from my home. Mama was standing in the doorway, shaking her head as if to say, "No, no, no." That was the last time I saw 700 North Patrick Street. At the station house, the police said my next-door neighbor, Edward Clark, a white man, swore out the warrant for my arrest. He told them I assaulted his 7-year-old daughter, Lillian. I am innocent. told them that. They opened an iron door and led me down a hallway lined with jail cells separated with iron bars. They looked like cages. The door clanged shut. The key scraped the metal as it turned, and then I was alone. On Tuesday, August 8th, at the mayor's court in City Hall, I found that more than 100 Black Alexandrians were in the streets the night before. The police told the court that the Black community was threatening the lives of white people. But Mr. Turley, who had an attorney, told the courtroom that the men were just trying to protect me because they heard some white men say they were going to lynch me. The mayor said that I was never in, quote, the slightest danger, yet the colored people had attempted to incite a riot, which may have easily led to the lynching they say they wanted to prevent. He fined them between $357 and $715. Most of them couldn't pay, and they were sent to the chain gang. Then my trial started. Little Lillian Clark stood on the witness stand. She told the court that I was sitting on the stairs just outside our doorway when she came over to get an axe. She told them I drew her towards me and pulled up her clothes. She complained about the way that I treated her. She sounded so grown up. I was there, and that is not what happened. When do I get a say? I am innocent. Mayor Simpson told the city sergeant to take me to jail to wait until a grand jury could meet. Officer Ferguson led me out of City Hall, my hand still cuffed. We walked several blocks down St. Asaph Street to the jail on the corner of Princess. A group of white boys followed behind us. I heard them snickering, threatening, saying things behind my back, not to my face. When I arrived, Deputy Sergeant B.B. Smith was in charge of the jail. Everyone was nervous that a lynching was in the works. In the afternoon, the Chief of Police, James Webster, came to the jail with 3 officers and 10 white people who they had deputized. They were there to guard me. As the night wore on, what started as a few voices outside the jail grew into a rumble by 11 o'clock, and more than 500 men crowded around the building, roaring for what they called justice and demanding the police hand me over. The city attorney and Mayor Simpson were out front. They were trying to get the mob to leave. The mayor said that they should let the law take its course, and when that didn't quiet them, he offered to convene a grand jury the next day so they could find me guilty and hang me. The mayor said if the jury didn't find me guilty, quote, I give you my word, as a man of honor, I will personally lead a mob tomorrow night to lynch Thomas. It didn't work. They threw him aside, and a loud bang shook the plaster walls. They were ramming the jailhouse door with a long, heavy wooden board. Gunshots rang out as police officers held their pistols out the windows, aiming towards the sky. The lynchers didn't retreat. Instead, they returned fire, and the guards fell back to a safer part of the jail. They were inside the building. The noise of them breaking down the iron door with an axe reverberated throughout. They were in the corridor. Terrified prisoners yelled out as white men searched for me in their cells. But I was in the basement, holding my breath, hiding in a barrel full of fish. The sound of boots on the wooden stairs meant they were on their way down the cellar. I held my breath. I am innocent. They were throwing things around the room, rooting around like hounds on a hunt. The barrel tipped over. The lid slid across the floor. I was found. A piercing yell went up the stairs, out the doors and windows. The announcement that the hunt was over. The prey was in hand. The crowd outside cheered. White hands pulled at me. Cold metal weapons touched my skin as I pulled and pushed up the stairs. I tried to get away, but there is no way out. They threw me from the steps of the door into the mass of whites. Hands and feet. Hands and feet. That's when Officer Wilkinson drew his pistols and fired once. The white sea parted. I was on the bare ground. Feet and hands pulled away from me. "That's the wrong man," Officer Wilkinson said. Started to walk away, then to run. A bullet hit me, but I kept moving. A townhouse, a doorway. I ducked inside and pushed up against the wall next to the front door, trying to disappear. There were screams coming from inside the house. "That's him. That is Benjamin Thomas," said one of the lynchers. A rope was wrapped around my chest. It jerked. I fell. White boys held the other end of the rope. They ran the full length of St. Asaph Street, dragging me behind. The cobblestones battered me. I tried to get free, but every time I found my feet, I was yanked back to the ground. Over 6 long blocks, I was kicked and pelted with rocks and bricks. I gathered every bit of strength I could and cried out, "Mama?" We were on King and stopped at the lamppost at Fairfax. Officer Wilkinson cut me down. Something cold and heavy pressed hard against my chest. I am innocent. Thank you.
Good afternoon, esteemed Alexandria and state officials, faith leaders, community members, and guests. I'm honored to be with you today, as I was honored to play a part in collecting some of the soil from Benjamin Thomas's house, where it was. I was inspired to write my poem today by an interview I watched on the Equal Justice Initiative website. It was of former U.S. Magistrate Judge Vanzetta Penn McPherson. She was asking, what if the soil we've collected could talk? She said, I thought that digging on that soil was a poignant way to connect with the time, the event, and most importantly, the man. So I offer this poem as a voice among us to make such connections. We find meaning in the soil we are touching and beholding today, and this helps us to commemorate in a deeper way the lives of our Alexandria compatriots, Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas. The earth speaks, honoring the lives of Benjamin Thomas and Joseph McCoy. The earth speaks. Listen to the stories from beneath our feet. Gather the soil, touch it, smell it. Reply with your breath and heart. This hallowed ground witnessed despicable deeds. It cries in pain. Let us open our ears to hear the mobs, the fists, whips, guns, and chains. Let us comprehend the horror of the noose and the lamppost. We must look back to sense the wounds and the grief, the wrongs inflicted on the agonized and aggrieved. At the same time, we ask this soil to teach us about where our ancestors worked and walked and loved, the places they learned and played, slept and ate and prayed, held weddings and baptisms and communal celebrations. They honored the living and the dead, protected and uplifted each other with love and kindness. This earth tells the vital stories. We feel the deep foundation gripping the stones we walk on, the roots of the struggle for freedom that keep trying to reach upward, to emerge and grow. Until today, we are still learning to make way for rays of light to nourish them. As we cup the sacred soil in our hands, we become grounded in history, surrounded by messages from the earth and blessings from the sky, like rain on an autumn day as it touches everything: our schools, homes, neighborhoods, the river and the trees. These tangible memories of Joseph and Benjamin and the earth that continues to speak. Thank you.
Now, as we bless this soil, we are going to have two faith leaders who are going to join us. First, for Joseph McCoy, we will have Reverend Dr. James Danley of the Roberts Memorial United Methodist Church. Reverend Danley will be followed for the blessing of the soil for Benjamin Thomas by Pastor Octavia Caldwell of Shiloh Baptist Church. Reverend Danley.
Good afternoon. According to Genesis, the 4th chapter, Cain asked Yahweh, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And this was after he had slain Abel. Yahweh declared that the blood of Abel was crying out from the soil. Here today, we bless the soil that absorbed the blood of Brother McCoy in hopes that the words of the prophet Amos might be a warning to those that ignore justice and turn a blind eye to righteousness, that we might seek good and not evil. That though we sing songs which echo praise, that unless they come from a genuine converted heart, they do not matter. But the prophet declares that what is pleasing to Yahweh is when justice flows like a river and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream throughout the land, such that acts of terrorism, bigotry, and hate are buried in archaeological digs, not in the hearts of Americans, such that acts of kindness are the norm and not the exception, such that love is a verb describing our actions toward one another, not something on a Hallmark card. So let it be written, let it be done, that this soil cries out and it demands a response. What will your response be? Will it be another monument that's tagged on a wall somewhere? Or will you be moved to really fight for justice, fight for the freedom that all of us claim to long for and that our Constitution says is guaranteed to us? I remember a man about 50 years ago on a hot August day as I was a teenager. He talked about a dream that he had. And in his speech, he talked about the fact that not just in places like Alexandria, but in Washington, D.C., in Philadelphia, in Atlanta, in Boston, in Kansas, that freedom needs to ring out so that all people can experience it, that all people can not be afraid to drive down a highway and be pulled over because you're driving while black. Acts of terrorism no longer occur in lynching, but I see them anyway in our communities, and they must stop. Maybe 150 years from now, there will be an archaeological dig and it'll pick up here in Alexandria and say, there were people who decided that they were going to put an end to bigotry, that they were going to put an end to biases, that they would put an end to discrimination. Or will it say, there were people who gathered and did nothing?
Good afternoon. I am Octavia Stanton Caldwell, and I serve as the Associate Pastor of Outreach at the Shiloh Baptist Church. Would you join me in prayer, please? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. We gather here to ask you to bless this soil that represents the remains of Benjamin Thomas and Joseph McCoy. As we ask you to bless the soil, it represents the commonality of our beginnings and our endings. For in Genesis, you from the soil formed humanity. And at our end, each of us will return to that soil. God, we ask you to cause your kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. We want to see your kingdom reign and bring with it justice. We want to see the reign of your righteousness, O God. We want to see the reign of peace. And most of all, O God, we want to see your reign of love. So, Father, we ask you to bless this soil that reminds us of so much that we must face as we turn toward our future. For healing and reconciliation cannot take place until the reality of history is faced. We ask you for all of these things in the mighty name of your Son, Jesus the Christ, who loved us so much that he gave his life that we might live. Amen.
An African proverb tells us that a people who lack knowledge of the past are like a tree without roots. And so in the spirit of remembrance, we pour this libation. We pour to honor the past, that we may learn from it. We pour so that we may learn from it. And we pour to honor the importance of family and community. A libation ceremony is a ritual of pouring water, a liquid, as an offering to a spirit, a deity, or a soul of a person who is deceased. After each pouring, the words, Ashe, a West African philosophical concept from the tribe of the Yoruba tradition of Nigeria, affirms the power to make change happen. Ashe means be with us. And so after each pouring, we collectively as a community will say, Ashe. And so, for the 84 African Americans who were lynched in the state of Virginia from 1877 to 1950, we pour for the 11 African Americans lynched in Northern Virginia, we pour. For the lynching of Joseph McCoy, we pour. For the lynching of Benjamin Thomas, we pour. And for the nearly reported 4,400 racial terror lynchings in the United States of America between Reconstruction and World War II, we pour. Ashe. And now it is my honor to recognize the descendants of Joseph McCoy. The Alexandria Community Remembrance Project has been searching for the descendants of Joseph McCoy and Benjamin Thomas, and recently, some of Mr. McCoy's relations. Representing the descendants here today, when I call your name, if you could stand to be recognized. Mrs. Deborah White. Mrs. Michelle Hill. And Bishop Robert Lewis Taylor. We are grateful that you have joined us today, and we hope that more of Mr. McCoy's descendants will come to Alexandria in the future. Alexandria, I now invite you to participate in the gathering of the soil. In a few moments, when indicated, we would like you to form a line at the outside end of your row. If you are on the McCoy side of the audience, you will process on the back side of the vessels, placing soil first into the McCoy jar, and then move to the Thomas vessel to fill his jar. If you are on the Thomas side of the audience, you will move along the inside in front of the vessels. When you are finished, please return to your seats. As we have many who would like to participate today, we ask that you select a small amount of the soil to place in the jars so that all will have an opportunity. Would the McCoy descendants please rise to initiate the collection, followed by our faith leaders in Alexandria, and then the seated and standing members of the public.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty.
Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the roiling sea.
Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us.
Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us.
Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on until victory is won.
Stony the road we've trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat hath not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed.
We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered.
Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast.
God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who has brought us thus far on the way.
Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray.
Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee.
Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee.
Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. how symbolic that our two students who read the narrative filled the rest of the jars. Friends, we have two grief trauma counselors who are with us this afternoon. They could stand and be recognized. Should you simply need to speak to one of them, it is an available resource for you. We also know that it is good for us as a community, black, white, gay, straight, to gather and to assemble, to pray, to sing, to hold hands, and to even to sing Kumbaya, to remember the legacy of Benjamin Thomas and Joseph McCoy. There comes a point where we must stop and move past the symbolism and get to action. There comes a point when we have to stop hanging the Black Lives Matter signs in front of our yard and get to action. And so we invite you, this community, to be in part of phase 2 of looking at what restorative justice looks like. And so on the back of your programs, there's a QR code. If you're not familiar with the QR code, you can contact the City of Alexandria about how to be involved in the Alexandria Community Remembrance Project. For we invite us all to move past the symbolic gestures and to fill it with action. Thank you.
As we bring this program to a close, I offer the words of Maya Angelou and a song by Miss Yolanda Adams. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt. But still, like dust, I rise. Shattered, shattered. But I'm not broken, wounded, but time will heal. Heavy the load, the cross I bear. Lonely the road I trod, I dare. But here I stand, weary, still I press on. Long are the nights, the tears I cry. Dark are the days, no sun in the sky, yeah. Yet still I rise, never to give up, never to give in against all odds. Yet still I rise high above. yet not in despair. Struggling, I make my way through. Trials, they come to make me strong. I must endure. I must hold on. Yet still I rise, never to give up, never to give in against all odds. Yet still I rise high above the clouds. At times I feel low, yet still I rise above all of these problems, above all that eyes can see. Knowing God is able to strengthen me, to strengthen me.